Tropical Depression 11 has just formed. What did I tell you guys? I knew it. But Tropical Depression 11 right here, right off, into the mid-Atlantic. And it has just formed as of the latest National Hurricane Center update. Here's what they have to say. 35 mile per hour winds, okay? So that's to be expected for tropical depression. 1007 millibars. It's moving west at around 16 mile per hour. So that's what we've got going on. A new tropical depression forms over in the Atlantic Ocean, and there, yeah, it's 5 p.m. So there we go. So this is all the latest from the National Hurricane Center right now. Here's the current track expected, and it's about right. Looking at what the models have been hinting towards, and they do show this staying as a tropical depression until 2 p.m. Wednesday, believe it or not, which is a little bit surprising. I do think it's going to become Josephine a little bit earlier than that, but we'll have to see. And then it does have to become a tropical storm by Thursday, and staying as a tropical storm through those unfavorable conditions as it moves, in the general west-northwest direction. Now, after that, if we do continue the track, we could potentially look at some kind of fish storm a little bit like this. But then again, a lot of the models do take us more south on the southern part of that cone. So we could see this cone shift a little bit more to the south, which would potentially bring it more towards the U.S. But still, nonetheless, Puerto Rico, Dominican Republic, and the upper Leeward Islands are definitely going to should monitor the system for potential impacts as we get into the later days. But right now, this is what we're looking at in terms of, the system. Now, I'd like to look at the interactive map, so that we can see a little bit of, a little bit of what, a little bit of what they're saying in time, in part, for the wind. So, let's see here. By 2 a.m., still 35 mile per hour. In 24 hours, still 35 mile per hour. And then by 2 a.m., August 13, 40 mile per hour, 45, 50, 50, so still 50. And then it drops down to 45 and down to 40. So it looks like they do expect this to weaken significantly after passing. They do pretty much expect this to weaken pretty significantly after by this point. If we got 50 here, and then by this point 45, then 40, and that would be because of those unfavorable conditions I've been talking about for the past couple of videos update, where I was saying it's going to encounter wind shear and drier in this area, which is why they do show a weaken, but it could definitely re-strengthen after that. All right, here's a look at what the system's been looking at lately. So we do have a lot of convection with this system. Well, but in the last couple of frames, it does seem like it's been getting a little bit more, potentially a little bit more thunderstorm over its center, but it got a little bit more of a elongated feel to it, where this morning it was a little bit more symmetrical. Now it looks a little bit more long, it's a little bit more oval, but it is still looking rather good. It's not looking too bad. If we look at the true color satellite imagery, you can see the same story. It does have an exposed center. It is one-sided. One-sided means all the convective or thunderstorm activity is all focused on one part. So with this system, we have all the thunderstorm and convective activity focused to the west side. Yeah, the northern western side of the system, and that causes that just makes that the center of circulation is exposed, which could sometimes weaken the system. But it looks like it's trying to cover that up with convection. But the reason for that is because of wind shear, easterly wind shear kind of pushing that convection over to the western side of that system. But that should start to weaken a little bit, so it could have a chance to really get its act together. Here's a look at the latest intensity guidelines, and that has shifted quite a lot from earlier in this morning's video. This morning, most of the model brought it at around 55, not at peak, and now we see most of the models don't bring it higher than 40 mile per hour or 45 mile per hour, which it's about what National Hurricane Center is going on. but most models only bring it to 40 miles per hour. This is pretty much the peak for every single model, 40 to 45 miles per hour or 35 to 40 knots. And when we see this, it's kind of interesting. And we also have maybe 50% of the models do keep as a tropical depression status. So we're seeing a shift in the models, thinking potentially it could be a little bit weaker than they expected. But I still think it's going to become at around 45 mile per hour, and then weaken slightly before really picking up again, into potentially a stronger tropical storm. So that's kind of my prediction with this system. So, and it doesn't really show that much of a drop off anymore. So we'll see. This morning we were seeing that drop off after 72 hours, and now we're not. We're seeing most models don't even think it's going to be a tropical storm in the next 72 hours, which is a little bit surprising considering it's gotten a whole lot more organized. But it's interesting. Now models have shifted again a little bit too. Now, the consensus of the model are pretty sure of what's coming in terms of a little bit of the short range. So it looks like a track uh, more south. It looks like a track more towards the upper Antilles, potentially the Dominican Republic, potentially Puerto Rico. Seems more likely, but we now have a little bit more models on board, also on board with that fish storm. So now this morning we only had two models on board with the fish storm idea. Now it looks like we have maybe four models here, 4 or 5 models on board with this turning to turning into the ocean. But we have also a lot more models on board with the system, and the consensus of most models do keep it right north, a little bit of an Isaias track, coming right north of Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, potentially um, going out into the Hispaniola and the Bahamas. So we're definitely gonna have to track this. But we're pretty certain where it's gonna go all the way to the Antilles. After that, it does become a whole lot more uncertain, even whether it's still gonna be alive in a tropical storm, a tropical depression by then. So it does become a whole lot more hard to predict and a whole lot more not a whole lot more uncertain. If we, as you can see right here, it does become a whole lot more spread out. If you had to make a cone, you can clearly see how spread out it gets at the end of that cone. So it's still rather uncertain. But just for comparison, the National Hurricane Center track brings it about here, about north of all of those, and then they do take it a little bit like this. So it is north of the consensus of the models, like most models. So we might see a shift south with the next cone update. Now, here's a look at the wind shear map, and this is what we've been talking about with this system. The big thing, the big in 72 hours when it's going to be encountering that wind shear and that dry air. So here's another look at the map. I know I showed it in this morning's video, but if you haven't seen it, here's another look at it. And again, here's with the system, that little white dot. And as it moves towards the lower Antilles, or the upper Antilles, the Antilles, this is where I'll put my line. This is the 72-hour mark line. And this is where it gets uncertain, because when it gets here, this is where it encounters that dry air, or that wind shear. And with this, we could be getting up to 30 to 40 knots of wind shear. And now, wind shear, it could kill a system. It's gonna blow the top off of the system and really shear it one side or another. See, when you have a center here and you have all the cloud cover at the top of it, what wind shear tends to do is, blow the top of it, and sometimes you only have the cloud cover on the east or western side of the system. And then when you start getting that dry air, it's really easily gonna just come in the system and completely kill the center, which then leads to the entire system becoming once again a open tropical wave. So this is why it's rather uncertain whether it makes it through that 30 knots, because it won't be in favorable conditions for a while. But I think it could make it. National Hurricane Center thinks it could make it. So I think we'll see this as a weak tropical storm. But there's still a chance that not only the wind shear decreases, but the dry could decrease in the next 3 days. We could see a whole lot less drier and wind shear. So right now, we're still going to have to keep a close look at it. Here's the dryer right now. And tropical depression 11. I think it's like around, maybe around here, maybe a little bit around here. So it's in not in too much dryer right now. There's a big block of dryer to the north of the system currently, but it's not currently located in too much dryer. But this big area of dryer here, it's gonna be pushing towards this. But there's still a chance again it doesn't get into dryer. Not only can the dryer kind of fall apart and dissipate out, it could also outrun the system. The slower it gets, the less dry it might get, because if this pulls out of the Caribbean quicker, then when Josephine or Tropical Depression 11 arrives there, maybe we won't have the dry air that we were thinking we would. So potentially, again, potentially that prohibitor won't be there. But if it is there, it's definitely going to have a whole lot of trouble with the wind shear and the dryer altogether. But there's still a pretty high chance it will survive that and then potentially thrive um, after it comes near the Bahamas, where it could really strengthen into something pretty big. But let's have a quick look at the models, especially let's have a quick look at the GFS with the systems, just to kind of look at what the GFS is thinking. So, 1007, 1006 millibars, 1008, 1008, and 1004 at most, 1001. You can see it there, and then it does dissipate out. So, this is right here. This is Tropical Depression 11 right here near the Lower Antilles. And as you can see, it does dissipate out into an open wave right after it passes that 72-hour period, which is what I was potentially saying. Potentially that could happen. And so that's what I was saying. Potentially it could happen. Sorry about that, guy. So, we're going to have to see. If we look at the European model, European model does show this be a fish storm. It does also show it, dissipate out. Not as much, but also a little bit. The GFS para also shows it just kind of dissipating out. So, it seems like still most of the models aren't that on board with the idea. CMC does keep it as a strong system, a somewhat strong system all the way, and actually makes it potentially making having landfall in North Carolina. So we're definitely gonna have to watch that very closely for just potentially impacts. Um, Icon hasn't rendered out yet, so we're definitely gonna have to watch out closely on that. Whether this could Nav Gems also making this a fish storm. And quickly, also, really quickly, we're gonna look at the HWRF, because it does tend to make systems a whole lot stronger than they're expected to. So I do want to see what their silence says. And so it's speaking about a tropical depression, tropical storm, all the way, still a weak tropical storm, all the way to the lower Antilles, and it keeps it, and then it kind of just becomes a tropical depression. So, it looks like the most models actually weaken it and, weaken it to tropical depression, if not open wave, by the time it gets to the lower Antilles, which is why it's so uncertain right now whether it's going to live or not. And, we're going to have to see. That's why I'm going to be bringing you guys daily updates on this, so that you do get the latest information. But right now, the area to get really the latest information, National Hurricane Center, and this is the cone. So really take this the most part, and we do have still a tropical storm by the end of the cone. So this is really what you should focus on, and it is what it is. This is what the National Hurricane Center is saying.